everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, a whole bunch of issues have been reported after installing April's Windows updates. Also, OpenAI announces a limited release of the new GPT 4.1. And ESXi is free once more. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops. And also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. As just stated, unfortunately, there has been quite a bit of Windows Update fallout news over the last week or so. First, the bizarre story of an empty inetpub folder showing up on patched desktops. For those experienced administrators out there, you may recognize the name inetpub, as this is a directory commonly found in IIS. Some saw this empty folder on their machines and instinctively just deleted it. But Microsoft has said it actually serves a security purpose and stated it should not be deleted. While Microsoft has yet to explain why the security updates are creating this empty inetpub folder in the first place, they have updated their advisory for a Windows Process Activation Elevational Privilege vulnerability tracked as CVE-2025-21204 to warn users not to delete the new empty inetpub folder on their drives. If you did delete the directory, bleepycomputer.com has some steps for recreating it. I find the steps a little bit much, to be honest, and think there's likely an easier way of just using ps-exec and recreating it. But honestly, I haven't looked into it myself, so I guess go with what others are suggesting. The key factor seems to be that the Windows Update created the folder with certain permissions using system context. But yeah, a really bizarre wrinkle in the Windows updates, and it's odd that it wasn't in the advisory to begin with. Hopefully not too many people went and deleted that folder. Microsoft also identified an issue where audit logon and logoff events in the local policy of the Active Directory group policy might not show as enabled on a device even if they are enabled and working as expected, and has now issued an out-of-band update to address the issue. They are also cumulative, so you do not need to install any previous updates before applying them, since they replace all prior updates. Microsoft did add to their advisory that home users are unlikely to be affected by this known issue since logon auditing is mainly necessary in enterprise environments. Microsoft has also said that some users may see a 0x800-70643 installation failure when trying to deploy the April 2025 Windows Recovery Environment updates. The known issue impacts KB5057589 on Windows 10 versions 22H2 and 21H2, and KB5057588 on Windows Server 2022 systems. The good news here is that Microsoft has said the installation errors can be ignored since they are inaccurate and don't impact the functionality of the Windows devices. Some Windows Server 2025 domain controllers may become inaccessible after a restart, causing apps and services to fail or remain unreachable due to the servers starting with the default standard firewall configuration instead of the domain firewall configuration after a recent update. While waiting for Microsoft to supply a permanent fix, you can use the PowerShell commandlet restart-netadapter with the asterisk, so kind of all. And customers are advised to create a scheduled task to automatically restart the network adapter whenever the domain controller server is rebooted. It may be a good idea to use something like ControlUp or Intune proactive remediation scripts if the task for this purpose, if you're allowed to have those agents on your domain controllers, which you probably are not. My guess is not that many enterprises have already switched their domain controllers to 2025, so hopefully the impact for this one is low. Microsoft also released another out-of-band update, this time for Office, to fix a known issue that caused Word, Excel, and Outlook to crash after installing KB 5002700. This is a security update specifically for Office 2016. Microsoft acknowledged problems following user reports on social media that their Office applications no longer opened after applying the recent April 2025 security updates. Office users affected by this issue can download KB 5002623 from Microsoft's Download Center, but it's important to note that this only applies to the Microsoft installer, Windows installer, that is, MSI-based edition of Office 2016. Separately, there was another issue that Microsoft has also fixed in a standalone download link for localized classic Outlook versions, which were automatically being set to English. And additionally, they confirmed that they are working on mitigating a licensing issue that is blocking access to Microsoft 365 services for some customers with family subscriptions. So yeah, there's a few different Office issues in play here, but there has also been that out-of-band Office update that's been made available, which is probably going to be the most important one because I can't imagine people with Office 2016 not being able to use Office is not an urgent issue, you know? So yeah, a little bit concerning this month as there are multiple out-of-band Windows updates to address issues related to Windows updates, and in some cases, issues that had not been patched by the time Patch Tuesday rolled around. So a little bit of a rough month here. OpenAI has announced that GPT-4.1, GPT-4.1 Mini, and GPT-4.1 Nano are now available through the OpenAI API. These are not yet available via the regular web UI. OpenAI explained that this new version includes many improvements in instruction following, coding, and intelligence, and has explained that some of this has been gradually incorporated into the latest version of GPT-4o, and they intend to continue to incorporate more with future releases. Benchmark numbers show improvements that 4.1 brings, and it scores a 54.6% on SWE's bench verified testing, up 21.4 points from GPT-4o. It also hit 38.3% on multi-challenge, which is an instruction following benchmark, and sets a new record on long video understanding with a 72% score on the video MME benchmark, where models analyze videos up to an hour long with no subtitles. GPT-4.1 also seems to be quicker than its predecessors too, with some queries being twice as quick than 4.0, and the Nano model just 5 seconds to produce a result. GPT-4.1 costs $2 per million input tokens and $8 for output, which is frankly not that bad. GPT-4.1 Mini is priced at 40 cents for input and $1.60 for output, and GPT 4.1 Nano, which is that small quick model, comes in at just 10 cents per input and 40 cents for output. It has been announced that Claude now has a $200 per month subscription tier similar to ChatGPT that's being called Max. According to Anthropic, the Max subscription gives you much more access to Claude than the regular Pro plan. For $200 a month, you'll get 20 times more usage. However, Claude Max limits users to 50 sessions per month. A session is a 5-hour period that starts when you send your first message to Claude. If you use Claude, again, within those 5 hours, it still counts as one session. But if you wait more than 5 hours and start a new conversation, it'll count as a new session, which seems to be upsetting some in the community, which frankly is completely understandable. Like, it's very difficult to kind of work within those kinds of confines of time. If you're on Claude Free or Pro, you'll reportedly encounter the same rate limit faster, and Anthropic will nudge you to pay for the Max tier. So, upselling and pushing on that higher subscription by basically making things inconvenient. And yeah, it's a race to the bottom with some of these subscription offerings. If you haven't checked out Black Mirror Season 7, Episode 1 yet, that's what comes to mind when reading and researching this story. Microsoft has started to roll out its recall feature to Copilot Plus PCs that are enrolled in the Insiders program, according to bleepingcomputer.com. And this is with the view to make the feature generally available in the near future, or at least that's the speculation. Users can pause the feature if they prefer not to use it, But this rollout is still upsetting some online. Obviously, Recall caught a lot of negative attention back when it was first announced. And although Microsoft has somewhat placated to the security concerns of people, it's still raising the ire of many in the community. Recall is now rolling to all Windows 11 insiders in the release preview channel. On Monday, Nvidia announced that it has started producing its Blackwell AI GPUs at TSMC's plant in Phoenix, Arizona, while companies within the state package and test them. So this is a very interesting development given all the news about tariffs. And I saw another report, not from The Verge, but from Ars Technica, also covering this story. And Ars Technica were reporting a little bit differently, suggesting that while manufacturing of the chips will take place at the Arizona plant, that some of the packaging for some of the more advanced workflows would still need to be carried out in Taiwan. And obviously, the raw source materials for the GPUs are mostly going to come from other countries, and a lot of that would be coming from China still. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this play out, because obviously AI is such a key driver for future economy, future business, or at least that's what administrations are saying. So tariffs could work contrary to this development. Fun fact, I lived very close to that plant about a decade ago, and it was being built up then. And obviously with supply chains, I remember during Brexit, some economists talking about how it would take 3 to 5 years at least to set up or establish plants in another country due to supply chain logistics. So likely this is actually probably something that's been in the works for a while, possibly in part due to the CHIPS Act. Although, some of that was supposed to involve Taiwan, and taking business away from Taiwan seems a little bit counter to that. I'm obviously not into geopolitics much, but Taiwan being under threat from China was identified as a threat to this type of development. So I believe some of this move has been in the works for a few years, but that's just my understanding without going into the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of it. Additionally, Nvidia announced that it's teaming up with the electronics manufacturers Foxconn and Wistron to build supercomputer production plants in Texas. The company says it expects mass production at the two plants to ramp up over the next 12 to 15 months. So again, at least what I've heard is it takes like 3 to 5 years for a new plant to ramp up and for the supply chain logistics to be worked out. So 15 months seems pretty ambitious. But these kinds of announcements tend to be made and they're over optimistic. Like, hey, 2,000 jobs created. It's like, well, the 2,000 jobs aren't immediately created, so it probably takes a little bit of a time. So I guess, hey, we'll have to watch this space. Foxconn is another company that has had its share of controversies too. So interesting story all around. And unfortunately, I think I've said it on a previous episode of the podcast, I tried to avoid the political stuff on this podcast, but it's so intertwined now with a lot of the tech news, because it's just intertwined with everything, with the way that the markets are going. So I'll try to avoid it as much as possible, but sometimes I'll have to dive into it. In sad news, Alphabet's Google laid off hundreds of employees in their platforms and devices unit. The cuts in the division, which houses the Android platform, Pixel phones, and the Chrome browser, among other applications, follows a January buyout offer to employees in the division. Google stated, quote, "Since combining the platforms and devices teams last year, we focused on becoming more nimble and operating more effectively, and this included making some job reductions in addition to the voluntary exit program that we offered in January," end quote. So unfortunately, more layoffs in the tech industry that has been going on for years now. Hopefully it'll show signs of abating, but with AI investments only just ramping up, really, it seems destined that we're going to see more layoffs in the future. Just to cover this one very briefly, because it seems there's little in the way of information from VMware or Broadcom to confirm this, but the Register picked up on the fact that a recent release note from Broadcom suggested, quote, Broadcom makes available the VMware vSphere Hypervisor version 8, an entry-level hypervisor. You can download it free of charge from the Broadcom support portal, which sure sounds like they're once again making a freely available version of ESXi. So if you're like me and you used ESXi in your home lab, this will be great news. I'm sure some people probably already switched to Nutanix for the home labs, or alternatively switched to the already free VMware Workstation instead. But this is great news because ESXi is still very widely used in enterprises. So being able to have that in your home lab to experiment with and test is going to be of critical importance. Finally, another quick hit story here, but FSLogix version 25.04 has been released, and this is mostly like a maintenance or fix release. And some of the issues that have been fixed include FSLogix containers that don't detach and prevent users from signing into a new session, FSLogix rules that don't apply to users as expected, quite a broad one. The FRX shell rule fails cleanup and prevents all user sign-ins, pretty major. And also, after signing in, users receive an error message that the recycle bin is corrupted, which I feel has been going on for a little bit now. And also, finally, searchindexer.exe crashing in Windows Server 2016. So if you're currently facing any of these issues with FSLogix, you want to get to that latest version. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. Just a couple of short ones because I'd like to try and get this around a 15-minute mark episode if I could, due to how long previous episodes have been. But first up, the awesome Midwest Management Summit, or MMS MOA, is going to be held on May 4th in Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So if you've never gone to this event before, this is definitely one you'll want to check out, particularly if you're working on the physical endpoint space. So like if you're a desktop administrator, analyst, or engineer, this is a really great conference that you'll want to check out. And finally, just to promote a little of my own work, the webinar that I promoted on last week's episode has now been completed by the time you listen to this episode, and it will be available for you to watch back on demand. And I'll share a link to that, as I do with everything I mention on every episode of the podcast, and you'll find that over at 5bytespodcast.com, and it's going to be with this episode, which is episode 382. But as always, thank you all so much for listening.